The $8 in Sienna Clark's hand were as crumpled and exhausted as she felt. 1 5 2 ones, and a sad collection of quarters that felt heavier than their worth. She stood under the sickly yellow buzz of a gas station fluorescent light, the cracked asphalt beneath her worn sneakers radiating the last of the day's heat. It was 11 p.m. The air was thick with the smell of gasoline and the distant, lonely rumble of the highway. This was it. Her entire net worth. $8.47 to be precise, but she'd already mentally allocated the change to the bus fare she'd need to get to the laundromat in the morning. That left the paper money. $8. It was Maya's breakfast and lunch money for tomorrow. Maybe if she was clever it could stretch to a small dinner too. A box of macaroni, a can of off-brand soup. The familiar, painful arithmetic of poverty spun in her head. A constant, draining calculation that left no room for hope. Her daughter Maya. The thought of her 6-year-old's face, still soft with sleep, was the only thing that kept Sienna's shoulders from slumping. Maya, who never complained about the threadbare blankets or the cereal that was more dust than flakes. Maya, who drew pictures of them living in a castle with a pantry full of colorful snacks. Sienna's love for her was a fierce, protective fire, but tonight the flames felt low, starved for the fuel of a few extra dollars. She was on her way home from her second job, a 2-mile walk from the diner that always left her feet screaming in protest. The hole in her left sole seemed to find every sharp pebble on the sidewalk. She'd cut through the gas station parking lot as a small shortcut, a tiny rebellion against the long walk home. Then she heard the sound. It wasn't a shout or a cry. It was a wet, ragged gasp, a desperate fight for air that cut through the night's drone. Sienna froze, her head snapping toward the source. Near a gleaming, chrome-heavy motorcycle, a man was on his knees. He was massive, a mountain of a man built from leather and denim, his thick gray beard a stark contrast to the growing pallor of his skin. His hand, covered in faded tattoos of skulls and flames, was clawed over his chest. He gasped again, a sound like a drowning man breaking the surface for the last time. His vest was covered in patches, but one stood out stark and infamous. A grinning skull with wings. Hell's Angels. Every warning she had ever heard, every news report, every whispered story screamed in her mind. Trouble. Danger. Criminal. Walk away. Keep your head down. You have a daughter to think about. The gas station door creaked open and the attendant, a scrawny man in his 30s with a bored expression, leaned out. He took a drag from his cigarette, his eyes landing on the scene with disinterest. "Don't get involved," he called out to Sienna, his voice flat. "Those guys are nothing but trouble. Just let him be." Sienna looked from the attendant's callous face to the man now collapsing onto the pavement. He landed with a heavy thud, his body going rigid before slackening. His face, visible in the flickering light, was turning a ghastly shade of gray. He was dying. Right there on the dirty asphalt, a few feet away from her. She looked down at the 8 crumpled dollars in her hand. Maya's breakfast. Her only safety net, as thin as the paper it was printed on. She thought of her daughter waking up to a bare cupboard, her small stomach rumbling. It was a physical pain, a twisting in her gut. But then another memory surfaced, sharper and more painful. Her grandmother years ago, collapsing on a busy city sidewalk. Stroke. People had walked past. They'd stepped over her. Eyes averted, too busy, too scared, too indifferent to stop. By the time someone finally called for help, the golden hour had passed. The doctors had said those few minutes could have made all the difference. Sienna had been 12, and the memory of that phone call was a scar on her soul. She couldn't do it. She couldn't be one of the people who walked away. Her grandmother's voice echoed in her memory, warm and steady as it had always been. Kindness costs nothing, baby, and sometimes it's all we got to give. Except this time it would cost everything she had. He's not breathing. Sienna's voice was a raw shout that surprised even her. She ran toward the attendant, who flinched back. Call 911. Now. The attendant rolled his eyes, a picture of apathy. Look, lady, he's probably just high on something. It's not our problem. An older man in a trucker hat, clutching a bag of chips, walked out of the store. He took in the scene, Sienna frantic, the attendant dismissive, the biker motionless. He shook his head slowly, a look of weary disapproval on his face. He walked over to Sienna and placed a gentle but firm hand on her arm. Miss, listen to him. You don't want to get mixed up in this. People like that, they're a different breed. You look like a good woman. You got a family to think about, right? Just go home. Sienna yanked her arm away, her heart pounding with a strange mix of terror and fury. A man is dying. The trucker sighed, muttered something under his breath about bleeding hearts, and walked to his rig. The engine roared to life, and he pulled away without a backward glance. She was alone. The attendant had retreated back inside, leaving her with the dying man in the humming, indifferent night. She dropped to her knees beside him, her worn jeans absorbing the grime of the pavement. Sir? Sir, can you hear me? His eyes, cloudy and unfocused, fluttered open. A weak, wheezing sound escaped his lips. Heart meds, forgot. Sienna fumbled for her phone. 1 bar of signal. 10% battery. Her fingers trembled as she dialed 911. The call connected for a second, a tinny voice saying 911, what's your? Before the line went dead. Damn it. She scrambled to her feet and burst into the gas station. The attendant looked up, annoyed. Call an ambulance right now, she commanded, her voice leaving no room for argument. He told me it's his heart. The attendant, finally spurred by the certainty in her voice, grumbled but picked up the phone behind the counter. Sienna didn't wait to see if he'd follow through. Her eyes scanned the shelves, candy, chips, soda. Then she saw it. A small section of pain relievers. She grabbed a bottle of aspirin and a bottle of water, her hands acting on pure instinct. She slammed them on the counter. How much? $6.50, the attendant said, his eyes lingering on her with a mixture of pity and contempt. She unfolded the crumpled bills, Maya's breakfast money, and flattened them on the counter. The attendant took the cash and slowly counted out her change. $1.50. She didn't wait for a bag or a receipt. She snatched the items and ran back outside, her heart hammering against her ribs. The man was still conscious, but barely. His breaths were shallow, his eyes closing. Sienna twisted the cap off the aspirin, her fingers clumsy with adrenaline. She shook 2 tablets into her palm, wrenched open the water bottle, and knelt beside him again. Hey, look at me. Her voice was soft but firm. I need you to chew these. Can you do that for me? He opened his mouth weakly. She placed the small white tablets on his tongue. Chew. Come on, you have to chew. He chewed, a slow, agonizing motion. A wince of pain crossed his face. She carefully lifted his head and held the water bottle to his lips. He managed a small sip. Help is coming, she said, her hand resting on his leather-clad shoulder. The material was worn and soft under her touch. You're going to be okay. Just stay with me. His hand, surprisingly large and heavy, came up and grasped hers. His grip was weak, but it was a connection, a tether to the living world. Name, he whispered, his voice a dry rasp. Sienna. Sienna Clark. Sienna, he coughed, the effort racking his massive frame. You saved my life. Not yet, she said, squeezing his hand. But I'm trying. In the distance, the first faint wail of sirens grew steadily louder. A wave of relief washed over her, so potent it made her knees weak. Suddenly, another sound ripped through the night, the guttural roar of a motorcycle. It screeched into the parking lot, and a younger man, maybe 30, with the same vest and a face etched with panic, leaped off and ran toward them. "Hawk! Oh my God, Hawk!" He dropped to his knees on the other side of the man, his eyes wide with shock. He looked at Sienna, his gaze shifting from suspicion to disbelief. You helped him?" "He needed help," Sienna said simply. The younger man stared at her as if she'd just sprouted wings. "Most people cross the street when they see us." Sienna didn't reply. She just kept her hand on Hawk's shoulder, a silent anchor, until the ambulance screeched to a halt beside them. The paramedics rushed out, their movements efficient and urgent. One of them knelt beside her. "Did you give him anything?" "Aspirin. 2 tablets maybe 3 or 4 minutes ago." The paramedic nodded, a look of professional approval in his eyes. "Smart move. You probably just saved his life." As they loaded Hawk onto the stretcher, he reached out and grabbed Sienna's wrist one last time. His eyes, clearer now, locked onto hers. His lips formed words she couldn't hear over the commotion, but the intensity of his gaze was unforgettable. The younger man, who called himself Cole, stood up as the ambulance doors closed. He walked over to Sienna, his face a mask of raw emotion. He pulled a plain white business card from his wallet and handed it to her. It had only a phone number and a small embossed logo, a crown with wings. "Hawk is going to want to thank you," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Please, call this number tomorrow." Sienna took the card, her own hands shaking. She looked at the strange logo, then back at Cole. "Who is he?" Cole managed a small, sad smile. "Someone important. Someone who doesn't forget kindness." The ambulance pulled away, its sirens screaming into the darkness. The gas station attendant stood in the doorway, arms crossed, shaking his head in silent judgment. Sienna stood alone in the parking lot, $1.50 in her pocket, and the heavy, bewildering weight of what she had just done settling over her. She had made a choice, and she had no idea it had just altered the entire course of her life. The 2-mile walk home was a journey through a dreamscape. The familiar cracked sidewalks and darkened storefronts felt alien, as if she were seeing them through a distorted lens. The adrenaline that had surged through her veins now left a hollow, trembling void in its wake. Every shadow seemed to hold a threat. Every distant noise sounded like the roar of another motorcycle. "Those guys are nothing but trouble." The attendant's words echoed in the empty streets. She replayed the scene over and over. The man's gray face, the frantic search for aspirin, the weak but insistent grip of his hand on hers. Had she been reckless? Had she invited danger into a life that was already hanging by a thread? She clutched the $1.50 in her pocket. Felt like a judgment. By the time she reached her apartment building, the rundown brick facade looked less like a home and more like a fortress she had foolishly left unguarded. It was nearly 1 a.m. She quietly let herself in. Her neighbor, Mrs. Lane, a kind, elderly woman who watched Maya for a pittance when Sienna's shifts ran late, was asleep on the lumpy couch. Maya was curled up beside her, a small, trusting ball under a thin afghan. The sight of her daughter, safe and peaceful, both soothed Sienna's frayed nerves and amplified her guilt. What had she been thinking, getting involved with a Hell's Angel? She gently shook Mrs. Lane awake. "I'm home. Thank you so much." Mrs. Lane nodded, her eyes groggy. "Everything all right, dear? You're later than usual." "Just a busy night," Sienna lied, not wanting to explain the inexplicable. After her neighbor shuffled out, Sienna carefully lifted Maya, whose little body was warm and pliant with sleep. She carried her to their shared bedroom and tucked her into her small bed. Maya stirred, her eyelids fluttering. "Mommy." "Sure, go back to sleep, baby." "I love you, Mommy." The simple words were a knife in Sienna's heart. "I love you too." She kissed her daughter's forehead, inhaling the sweet scent of her hair. This was what mattered. This tiny perfect human. And she had just gambled with their stability for a stranger. In the small dim kitchen, she sat at the wobbly table. The overdue notice on the refrigerator, held by a magnet shaped like a cartoon cat, seemed to mock her. Final notice. Rent was due in 3 days. She was still $150 short. The landlord, Mr. Henderson, was a man whose patience had long since worn thin. She pulled the business card from her pocket. The Crown with Wings logo glinted under the single bare bulb overhead. It felt heavy, dangerous. She turned it over. Nothing but a phone number. Who were these people? What did they want from her? A thank you? Or something else? She couldn't shake the feeling that this piece of paper was a key to a door she never should have unlocked. She looked at the $1.50 on the table. Tomorrow Maya would ask for breakfast. Sienna would have to give her the last, slightly bruised banana and the handful of crackers at the bottom of the box. There would be no milk for the cereal dust. There would be no juice. Because she had spent their last $8 on a dying biker. The shame was a bitter metallic taste in her mouth. She pulled out her journal, a small spiral-bound notebook she'd bought at the dollar store. It was a habit her grandmother had instilled in her. Every night, no matter how hard the day, write down 3 things you're grateful for. It trains your heart to look for the light, baby. Tonight, finding the light felt like searching for a star in a hurricane. Her hand shook as she opened to a blank page. After a long moment she wrote, 1. Maya is safe and healthy. 2. I helped someone tonight. 3. Tomorrow is a new day. She wasn't sure she believed the second one was something to be grateful for, not yet. Felt more like a liability. She closed the journal and placed the business card beside her bed on the floor. A silent white rectangle in the darkness. As she lay down, sleep felt a million miles away. She had no idea that across town in a sterile hospital room, Hawk was awake, his voice weak but firm, telling Cole to gather everyone. She had no idea her name, Sienna Clark, was being passed from one person to another in rooms she would never see. A name now tied to an act of unexpected compassion. All she knew was the gnawing anxiety in her stomach, and the inescapable truth that she had done what she felt was right, even if it had cost her everything. The 5 a.m. alarm was a cruel, shrill scream. Sienna's body felt like it was filled with sand. Every muscle ached with a weariness that went deeper than a long shift. It was the exhaustion of constant worry. She dragged herself into the kitchen. The open cabinet confirmed her fears. 1 banana, a few sad-looking crackers. It was a still life painting of desperation. She forced a smile onto her face, a mask she wore so often it had begun to feel like her own skin. She artfully arranged the meager rations on a plate and poured a glass of water. Maya padded into the kitchen, rubbing the sleep from her eyes. Morning, Mommy. What's for breakfast? A special breakfast today, baby, Sienna said, her voice bright and brittle. Banana boats and cracker sales. You're the captain of the breakfast ship. Maya, in her infinite innocent grace, didn't question it. She never did. She climbed into her chair and began her imaginary voyage, humming happily. Sienna watched her, her own stomach a tight, empty knot. There wasn't enough for her. There rarely was. Just as Maya finished her last cracker, there was a knock at the door. Sharp and insistent. Sienna frowned. It was barely 7 a.m. Mr. Henderson, maybe? Had he finally decided to throw them out before the month was even over? She opened the door to find Mrs. Johnson, her neighbor from across the hall. A formidable woman in her 60s who had lived in the building for 30 years. Mrs. Johnson was the neighborhood's unofficial matriarch, its eyes and ears. This morning her arms were crossed, and her face was set in a deep, disapproving frown. Sienna, baby, she said, her voice low and tight. We need to talk. Good morning, Mrs. Johnson. Is everything okay? Mrs. Johnson stepped closer, her gaze darting past Sienna to where Maya was sitting at the table. She lowered her voice to a conspiratorial whisper. I heard what you did last night. At the gas station. Word travels, child. They say you helped one of those biker thugs. One of those Hell's Angels. Sienna's stomach plummeted. How? How could she possibly know already? The gas station attendant? The trucker? He was having a heart attack, Mrs. Johnson. I had to do something. Child, those men are criminals. Mrs. Johnson cut her off, her voice sharp with judgment. Drugs, violence, all kinds of mess. They bring nothing but poison wherever they go. What were you thinking? You have that sweet baby girl to think about. He was a human being, Sienna said, her own voice quiet but steady. He was dying. That's all I saw. Mrs. Johnson shook her head, the disappointment radiating from her like heat. You are too kind for your own good, Sienna. Always have been. But that kindness is going to get you hurt one day. It's going to invite trouble right to your doorstep. You mark my words. She turned and walked back to her apartment, leaving Sienna standing in the open doorway, a cold dread seeping into her bones. She slowly closed the door, her hands shaking. Did I make a mistake? The question was no longer a whisper. It was a roar. She looked at Maya, happily humming her sea shanty, blissfully unaware. Sienna took a deep, shuddering breath. She had to hold it together. For Maya, the 8 hours at the laundromat were a blur of folding. Jeans, towels, sheets. The repetitive motion was usually meditative, but today her mind was a whirlwind, replaying Mrs. Johnson's words. That kindness is going to get you hurt. Linda, her coworker, a kind, plump woman with a halo of white hair who had worked there for 20 years, noticed her distraction. She came over and sat on a stack of folded towels beside Sienna. You okay, honey? You look like you didn't sleep a wink. Sienna hesitated. Then the story spilled out of her. The gas station, the biker, the heart attack, her last $8. Linda's eyes grew wide. You helped a Hell's Angel, she breathed. Girl, you're braver than me. Or stupider, Sienna muttered. According to my neighbor. Linda reached over and squeezed her hand, her touch warm and reassuring. Sienna, baby, you did what your heart told you to do. You have a good heart. Don't you let anyone, not even old busybody Johnson, make you feel bad about that. But what if she's right? What if I brought trouble into our lives? I have to think about Maya. Linda looked her square in the eye. You saved a man's life. That is never the wrong thing to do. Ever. Sienna wanted to believe her. She desperately wanted to. But the seed of doubt had taken root. During her 15-minute break, she sat in the stuffy back room and pulled out the business card. She stared at the crown with wings. On a wild, inexplicable impulse, she pulled out her phone and typed a text message. Hi, this is Sienna Clark. A man named Cole gave me this number last night. She hit send before she could second-guess herself. Her phone rang less than 10 seconds later. An unknown number flashed on the screen. Her heart leaped into her throat. She couldn't answer it. Not here. She let it go to voicemail. A minute later, a notification popped up. She pressed the phone to her ear, her hand cupped over the speaker. A man's voice, calm and deep. Cole's voice filled the line. Sienna, it's Cole. Thank you for reaching out. Listen, Hawk is doing okay. He's asking for you. He wants to meet you today. Can you come to Murphy's Diner on 5th Street at 3 p.m.? It's important. Please. Her heart pounded against her ribs like a trapped bird. Linda leaned over. What is it? They want to meet me. This afternoon. Then you go, Linda said without a moment's hesitation. What's the worst that could happen? You get a free cup of coffee. Sienna tried to smile, but her stomach was a churning sea of anxiety. Her shift ended at 2 p.m. She could take the bus and make it to the diner by 3. But what if it was a trap? What would Mrs. Johnson say if she found out? What if this really was the mistake that would unravel her already fragile life? As she walked out of the laundromat that afternoon, the sun bright and unforgiving, she noticed something that made her blood run cold. Across the street, parked in the shade of an old oak tree, were 2 motorcycles. The same kind as last night. 2 men in leather vests sat on them, not talking, just watching. She froze on the sidewalk. They saw her look. One of them slowly lifted a hand and gave her a respectful nod. Then, as if on a silent signal, they both started their engines, the roar echoing down the street, and rode off. Sienna stood paralyzed, her heart racing. What had she walked into? And more importantly, could she ever walk back out? The bus ride to 5th Street was an exercise in controlled panic. Sienna sat with her hands clenched in her lap, her knuckles white. Every rumble of the engine sounded like an approaching motorcycle. Every person who got on the bus was subjected to her furtive, anxious scrutiny. She felt exposed, marked. The memory of the 2 bikers nodding at her was seared into her mind. It hadn't felt threatening, not exactly. It felt possessive. Like they knew her, had a claim on her she didn't understand. She clutched her purse, which contained her wallet, her keys, and the $1.50 that was a constant, tangible reminder of her decision. She almost got off the bus 3 stops early, ready to run home, lock the door, and pretend none of this had ever happened. But Cole's voice on the voicemail, the earnest plea in his tone, "It's important, please," kept her in her seat. That, and a deeper, more stubborn curiosity she couldn't ignore. As the bus turned onto 5th Street, her breath caught in her throat. Murphy's Diner, a classic chrome and red establishment from another era, was surrounded. Motorcycles. Dozens of them parked in perfect, gleaming rows, their chrome catching the afternoon sun like a constellation of earthbound stars. It was an occupation, a declaration. Her stomach dropped. This was a mistake. A terrible, life-altering mistake. The bus hissed to a stop, the doors sighing open. For a long second, Sienna remained frozen, her feet bolted to the floor. Go home, her fear screamed. Go home to Maya. But something else, a force she couldn't name. Maybe the memory of her grandmother's courage, maybe the sheer, dumbfounding nature of the situation, made her stand up. She walked down the steps and onto the sidewalk, her legs feeling like they were made of wood. Bikers lined the walkway. They were exactly as the stereotypes had painted them. Big men with tattoos snaking up their arms and necks, beards braided with silver rings, leather vests adorned with a cryptic tapestry of patches. Women, too, with fierce eyes and an air of untouchable confidence. They stood in small groups, arms crossed, not speaking. They weren't loud. They weren't menacing. They were just waiting. For her. As Sienna began her long, terrifying walk toward the diner's entrance, a strange thing happened. A path cleared. The bikers stepped back, creating a silent corridor. As she passed, each one nodded. A deep, slow, respectful dip of the chin. An older man with a long gray ponytail touched the brim of his cap. No one smiled, but there was no hostility in their eyes. There was only a profound, unnerving stillness. It felt less like a threat and more like a procession. Her heart pounded a frantic rhythm against her ribs. What did this mean? She reached the glass door of the diner, took a breath that did nothing to calm her, and pushed it open. A small bell chimed, a ridiculously cheerful sound in the heavy silence. Every booth and table inside was filled with more bikers. The air was thick with the smell of coffee and leather. And as she stepped inside, every single person turned to look at her. The low hum of conversation ceased. The clinking of cutlery stopped. The only sound was the buzz of the neon sign in the window. Out of the oppressive silence, Cole emerged from a back room. A genuine relieved smile spread across his face, instantly softening his hard features. "Sienna." Thank you for coming." He beckoned for her to follow him, and as they walked through the diner, something incredible, something utterly surreal happened. The bikers stood up. One by one, booth by booth as she passed, they rose to their feet. It was not a sudden movement, but a slow rolling wave of silent respect moving through the room. They didn't speak. They just stood, their eyes following her. Sienna had never felt so small and so significant at the same time. It was a gesture of honor so profound and unexpected that it left her dizzy. It felt sacred. Cole led her to a corner booth, more private than the others. A man sat there, his back to the room. As they approached, he stood up slowly, a slight wince of pain crossing his features. It was Hawk. He looked different than he had on the pavement. His color was back, his eyes were clear and sharp, and though he moved stiffly, the terrifying fragility was gone. He was still a mountain of a man, but today he looked like a king in his castle. "Sienna Clark," he said, his voice a low, gravelly rumble. "Please, sit." She slid into the worn vinyl of the booth, her hands hidden under the table so he couldn't see them tremble. Cole remained standing, a silent guard a few feet away. Hawk sat down opposite her and studied her face, his gaze intense and searching. It was as if he were trying to reconcile the memory of the frantic woman in the parking lot with the terrified one sitting before him now. "How are you feeling?" he asked. The question was so simple, so normal it almost made her laugh. I'm fine," she stammered. "How are you?" "Doctor said the aspirin you gave me broke up the clot that was forming. Said if you hadn't acted as fast as you did, I'd be dead. No two ways about it." He said it plainly, a statement of fact, but his eyes held a depth of gratitude that was overwhelming. "I'm just glad you're okay," she whispered. Hawk leaned forward, his large hands resting on the table. "Cole told me everything. He told me he tried to give you money for the aspirin for your trouble. He told me you wouldn't take it." Sienna shook her head. "It wasn't about money." "I know," Hawk said, his voice softening. "That's why I had to meet you. Cole also told me you have a daughter, that you work 2 jobs. He saw the hole in your shoe." Sienna's face flushed with a mixture of embarrassment and indignation. She felt exposed, her poverty laid bare on the diner table. "He told me," Hawk continued, his voice dropping lower, "that you likely used your last $8 to save my life." Sienna shifted uncomfortably, her gaze falling to the tabletop. She didn't know what to say. Hawk reached into his vest and pulled out a worn leather wallet. From it, he carefully extracted a faded photograph and slid it across the table. It was a picture of a younger Hawk, his beard not yet gray, standing with his arm around a smiling woman. Between them stood a little girl, maybe 7 or 8 years old, with bright, mischievous eyes and a gap-toothed grin. She was holding a dandelion. "That's my daughter," Hawk said quietly. "Her name was Lily." The past tense hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. "Was," he repeated, his voice thick with an ancient grief. "Leukemia. She was 7. We were broke back then. Just starting out. We couldn't afford the treatments, not the good ones. We scrambled, we begged, we borrowed. But insurance companies don't care about sick little girls. By the time we got the money together, it was too late." Sienna's throat tightened. She looked from the vibrant little girl in the photo to the hardened man sitting across from her, and for the first time she saw past the vest and the tattoos. She saw a father whose world had been shattered. "I'm so sorry," she whispered, the words feeling pitifully inadequate. Hawk's jaw tightened, the muscles flexing under his beard. "After she died, I fell apart. For a long time. But then I made a promise. On her grave I made a promise that I would spend the rest of my life helping people who were in the same spot we were. People who were drowning. And I promised I would honor anyone who showed real kindness, The kind that costs something, the kind you show when you have nothing left to give. Because that's the purest thing there is in this world. It's what Lily would have wanted. He carefully slid the photo back into his wallet, his movements gentle and reverent. Sienna was speechless. The entire world had just tilted on its axis. The man in front of her wasn't just a biker. He was a grieving father. This wasn't a gang. It was something else entirely. Hawk looked her directly in the eye, his gaze unwavering. Tomorrow morning, something is going to happen at your apartment. I'm telling you now so you won't be scared. Don't call the cops. Don't run. Just trust me. Can you do that? What? What do you mean? What's going to happen? A slow, genuine smile touched Hawk's lips for the first time. It transformed his face. You'll see. He stood up, the bikers in the diner watching his every move. He pulled a $100 bill from his pocket and left it on the table to cover a cup of coffee she hadn't even ordered. He offered Sienna his hand. Hesitantly, she took it. His grip was firm and warm. Thank you, Sienna Clark, he said. Then he walked out, Cole right behind him. Sienna sat alone in the booth, surrounded by dozens of silent, standing bikers, her mind reeling. The silence was broken as an older biker, the one with the ponytail who had tipped his cap, leaned over her booth as he passed. You did good, miss, he said, his voice raspy. Real good. Then he too was gone. Within minutes, the diner was empty. The only evidence of the occupation, the lingering smell of leather and the $100 bill on her table. Sienna felt like she'd just woken from the strangest dream of her life. And she had the terrifying premonition that the dream was far from over. The bus ride home was even more disorienting than the ride there. Sienna clutched the $100 bill in her hand. It felt like a fantasy, an impossible object from another world. It was rent money. It was grocery money. It was a new pair of shoes. It was a brief, blissful reprieve from the constant, crushing weight of her finances. But it was also a mystery, a down payment on a promise she didn't understand. Tomorrow morning, something is going to happen. Just trust me. Trust him? A man she'd met for all of 10 minutes. The leader of what the world considered a dangerous criminal gang? It was insane. But she had seen the picture of his daughter. She had heard the story of Lily. She had felt the weight of his grief and the sincerity of his gratitude. And she had seen the silent, profound respect in the eyes of his men. They weren't a gang of thugs. They were an army fueled by loyalty and a shared purpose she was only just beginning to glimpse. As she got off the bus a block from her apartment, the neighborhood was already buzzing. Word, as Mrs. Johnson had said, traveled fast. She saw small clusters of neighbors talking on their porches, their voices dropping to whispers as she approached. Curtains twitched in windows. She felt their eyes on her, a mixture of fear, curiosity, and judgment. Mr. Rodriguez, a man in his 40s from 3 doors down who usually offered a friendly wave, stood on his porch with his arms crossed, a deep frown on his face. He was talking to Mrs. Johnson. That girl Sienna, Mrs. Johnson was saying, her voice carrying on the evening air. I told her no good would come of it. Getting mixed up with those bikers. Mr. Rodriguez's eyes met Sienna's for a brief, cold moment before he looked away. Hell's Angels on our street? We have kids here. We have to do something. This can't be happening. A young mother Sienna recognized from the park overheard them and quickly ushered her 2 small children inside. Her face pale with alarm. I'm keeping my kids inside tomorrow. You can't be too careful. The poison was spreading. Fear, contagious and irrational, was infecting her community. The very people who had watched her struggle for years, offering sympathetic but ultimately empty platitudes, were now turning on her. They weren't worried for her. They were worried about her. She was no longer just poor Sienna, the quiet single mom who worked 2 jobs. She was a threat, an association, a risk. She walked the gauntlet of silent stares and whispered conversations, her head held high, though inside she was crumbling. She unlocked her apartment door and stepped inside, the silence of her small, shabby home a welcome relief. Mrs. Lane was sitting with Maya, helping her with a coloring book. Maya ran to her, wrapping her arms around Sienna's legs. "Mommy, you're home." Sienna hugged her daughter tightly, burying her face in her hair. This was her world. This was all that mattered. Had she just endangered it? After she paid Mrs. Lane, using part of the $100 bill, which earned her a surprised but grateful smile, she sat with Maya for dinner. Macaroni and cheese, made from a box she'd had in the back of the pantry. As Maya chattered about her day, Sienna's mind was elsewhere. "Don't be scared. Just trust me." The words were a strange mantra, battling against the chorus of fearful warnings from her neighbors. She was caught between two worlds, the one she knew, which was hard and unforgiving but familiar, and this new one she had stumbled into, which was intimidating and mysterious, but which had shown her a baffling form of honor. That night, as she lay in bed listening to the soft, even breaths of her daughter, she felt a profound sense of loneliness. She had made a decision in a dark parking lot, a simple human choice. And now she was an island, judged by her neighbors and entangled with a group of bikers she barely understood. She looked at the ceiling, tracing the cracks in the plaster. Tomorrow was coming. Whatever it held, she would have to face it alone. She closed her eyes, a pit of dread and a flicker of impossible hope warring in her stomach. She wondered if she just made the biggest mistake of her life. Sienna woke not to her alarm, but to a sound. It started as a low, deep vibration that she felt in her bones before she heard it. A distant rumble like a coming storm. But it wasn't thunder. It grew steadily, a guttural mechanical growl that multiplied, layering on top of itself until it became a deafening roar that shook the very windows of her apartment. Engines. Hundreds of them. "Oh my God," she whispered, throwing off her thin blanket. She rushed to the window and peered through the blinds. What she saw stole the air from her lungs. Her street, usually quiet and dotted with a few beat-up sedans and minivans, was gone. In its place was a river of chrome and steel. Motorcycles, at least 100 of them, were parked in perfect military formation, taking up both sides of the road. Bikers in black vests stood beside them, a silent, formidable army that had materialized out of the dawn. "Mommy, what's that noise?" Maya ran into the room, her small hand clutching her teddy bear, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and excitement. "Why are there so many motorcycles?" Sienna had no answer. Her mind was a blank slate of shock. "Don't be scared," Hawk had said. It was an impossible request. She was terrified. She threw on clothes, her hands fumbling with buttons and zippers. "Stay here, baby. Just for a minute." She rushed outside, Maya peeking from behind the half-closed door. The entire neighborhood had been drawn out by the noise, but their faces weren't curious. They were horrified. Windows slammed shut. Doors were bolted. Parents frantically pulled their children back from porches. Mrs. Johnson was on her stoop, her phone pressed to her ear, her voice trembling but loud. "Yes, police. There's a gang on our street. A whole army of them. You have to send someone right now." Mr. Rodriguez, his face red with a combination of fear and fury, ran towards Sienna, pointing an accusing finger. "Sienna, what did you do? Why are they here? You brought a gang to our street. Our kids live here." Other neighbors, emboldened by his anger, started to gather, their voices rising in a panicked chorus. "What were you thinking? This is your fault. I told you," Mrs. Johnson shouted, her voice shrill. "I warned you this would happen." The crowd pressed closer, a circle of angry, frightened faces. They were looking at her as if she were a monster, a traitor who had brought the enemy inside their gates. Maya, witnessing the raw animosity aimed at her mother, burst into tears. "Mommy, I'm scared," she cried, clinging to Sienna's leg. Sienna pulled her close, her own hands shaking uncontrollably. She tried to shield her daughter from the hateful glares. "It's okay, baby. It's okay." But she didn't know if it was. She felt the world closing in on her. The weight of her neighbor's fear and the intimidating presence of the bikers creating a suffocating pincer movement. Just as the panic threatened to consume her, Cole stepped forward from the ranks of the bikers. He moved with a calm authority, raising his hands in a gesture of peace. "Folks, please," he said, his voice carrying easily over the nervous murmurs. "We're not here to cause any trouble." "Then why are you here?" Mr. Rodriguez shouted back, his voice cracking. "You're terrifying our children." Cole's gaze found Sienna in the crowd, a look of apology in his eyes for the scene she was being subjected to. Then he turned back to the neighbors. "We're here to help one of your own," he said, his voice clear and firm. 2 nights ago, Sienna Clark saved a man's life when no one else would. Now we're here to save hers. A stunned silence fell over the crowd. As if on cue, a large moving truck, the kind used for cross-country relocations, rumbled around the corner and hissed to a stop. The bikers began opening the back, their movements organized and efficient. Cole addressed the bewildered neighbors again. "My name is Cole. I'm a volunteer with an organization called Lily's Legacy. We're a nonprofit that helps struggling families." "Nonprofit?" someone in the crowd muttered, their tone thick with skepticism. "You're Hell's Angels." "The man Sienna saved, Hawk, is our founder," Cole explained, his voice patient. "He started Lily's Legacy 20 years ago, after his 7-year-old daughter died of leukemia because he couldn't afford her medical bills. In those 20 years we have helped over 3,000 families. We raise money, we build homes, we pay for surgeries, and we help people get back on their feet." The crowd was silent, processing this impossible information. Mr. Rodriguez's angry expression began to crumble, replaced by a look of dawning recognition. "Wait, Lily's Legacy? Did you say Lily's Legacy?" Cole nodded. You helped my cousin in Detroit last year. Miguel Rodriguez. He's a veteran PTSD. He was homeless. You guys got him into therapy, paid his first 6 months' rent." A woman in the crowd gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. "Lily's Legacy paid for my son's heart surgery 2 years ago. We were denied by our insurance. You saved his life." Another voice piped up from the back. "You saved my grandmother's house from foreclosure in the winter." The atmosphere on the street began to shift, a palpable change from fear to awe. The angry mob was dissolving, replaced by a group of individuals looking at the bikers, and at Sienna with new eyes. Mrs. Johnson's hand covered her mouth, her face a picture of shame. "Oh Lord," she whispered. "We judged you all so wrong." The back of the truck was open now, and Hawk stepped out, moving slowly but with undeniable presence. The crowd of neighbors instinctively parted for him as he walked toward Sienna. He didn't look at her at first. He turned and faced her neighbors, his expression understanding. "I get it," Hawk said, his deep voice commanding their attention. "You saw the jackets, the bikes, the tattoos. You got scared. That's a human reaction." He then turned and pointed a finger at Sienna, who was still holding her crying daughter. "But this woman," he said, his voice ringing with emotion, "this woman didn't see any of that. She saw a man dying on the pavement, and she used her last $8, her daughter's breakfast money, to save my life." Complete profound silence. She didn't know who I was. She didn't care. She just saw a human being who needed help. And in a world that teaches us to fear each other, to judge a book by its cover, that is the bravest thing a person can do. That's the world I'm trying to build. A world where people see people, not stereotypes. An elderly black man, Mr. Williams, who had lived on the street for 40 years, stepped forward, his eyes wet with tears. Son, I judged you by your jacket, not your heart. I was wrong. I am so sorry. He extended a frail, trembling hand. Hawk took it gently. We all make mistakes, sir. The important thing is what we do after. One by one, her neighbors approached. Apologies, handshakes, tears. Mr. Rodriguez walked directly to Sienna, his own eyes shining with shame. I'm so sorry I yelled at you. You were braver than all of us. You're a hero. Sienna, overwhelmed, couldn't speak. She could only clutch Maya and weep. Hawk knelt down in front of her, wincing slightly. You gave me a second chance at life, Sienna Clark. Now let me give you one. He handed her a thick white envelope. Her hands shaking, she opened it. Inside was a check. Made out to her. For $25,000. Sienna stared at the number, at the impossible string of zeros. Her mind couldn't process it. It was a lifeline. It was freedom. It was a dream. But there was more. Behind the check was a letter, an official letterhead bearing the Crown with Wings logo. It was a job offer. Position, Community Outreach Coordinator, Lily's Legacy. Salary, $52,000 per year. Full medical, dental, and vision benefits. Health insurance effective immediately. Sienna's knees buckled. She literally dropped to the ground, the papers fluttering from her hands, and sobbed. Not tears of sadness or fear, but of overwhelming, crushing relief. The dam of years of stress and struggle and quiet desperation had finally broken. Maya knelt beside her, wrapping her tiny arms around her neck. Mommy, why are you crying? Happy tears, baby, Sienna choked out. They're happy tears. The entire street, neighbors and bikers alike, erupted in applause and cheers. The sound was a joyous, thunderous celebration. Mrs. Johnson rushed forward and pulled Sienna into a fierce hug. Baby girl, you showed all of us how to be better people today. I am so sorry. Hawk, still kneeling, pulled a single key from his pocket. One more thing, he said, a gentle smile on his face. We heard your car broke down. We bought it from the impound lot. It's fully repaired, new tires, full tank of gas. It's parked around the corner. Sienna looked up, her face streaked with tears and dirt from the sidewalk. Why? She whispered. Why are you doing all of this? Hawk's eyes glistened. 20 years ago, my Lily died because we didn't have enough money. I swore on her memory that I would never let that happen to another good family if I could help it. You saved my life with your last dollars. You didn't hesitate. You didn't ask for anything in return. You, Sienna Clark, are who the world needs more of. You're who I need on my team. But I'm nobody special. You're wrong, Hawk said, his voice thick with conviction. You're exactly who we've been looking for. Cole stepped forward, a wide grin on his face. There's more. Come on. He led her to the open moving truck. Inside it was a wonderland. A beautiful new couch. A solid wooden dining set. A brand new bed frame and mattress for Maya. Dressers, bookshelves, lamps. And boxes upon boxes of groceries, new clothes for both of them, toys, school supplies. Everything. A whole new life packed into a 20-foot truck. Sienna laughed through her tears, a sound of pure, unadulterated disbelief and joy. This is too much. It's not enough, Hawk said, coming to stand beside her. But it's a start. The bikers began unloading the truck, forming an efficient human chain. And then the most amazing thing of all happened. Her neighbors, who an hour ago had been hiding behind locked doors, stepped forward to help. Mr. Rodriguez grabbed a box of pots and pans. Where do you want this? Mrs. Johnson started directing traffic. Careful with that bed. Take it in easy. The young mother who had locked her kids inside now had them helping carry boxes of toys. The entire street, a community fractured by fear and prejudice, came together, united in an act of service and celebration. Hawk stood beside Sienna, watching the scene unfold. "Tomorrow," he said quietly, "we start the paperwork to buy that vacant lot on the corner. We're going to build a community center. Right here." "A community center? We'll call it Clark House," he said, looking down at her. "Named after you." Sienna just shook her head, the tears starting anew. "You can't." "I can," he said. "And I am." Maya tugged on her hand, her face a mask of pure ecstatic joy. "Mommy, look. They brought me a bike. A pink one." Sienna looked at her daughter's face. No fear. No worry. Just the unblemished happiness of a child who feels safe and loved. And something inside Sienna, something that had been clenched tight for years, finally let go. For the first time she felt real undiluted hope. "Thank you," she whispered to Hawk. He shook his head. "You already thanked me," he said. "That night in the parking lot. You saw me. Not the vest, not the tattoos. Just a man who needed help. In the end, that's all any of us really need." By noon, Sienna's apartment was transformed. The old sagging couch was on the curb, replaced by a beautiful sturdy sofa with soft cushions. Maya's mattress, which had been on the floor, was now in a real bed frame with fresh sheets and a fluffy comforter. Her neighbors and a group of bikers, who now seemed like old friends, worked side by side, their laughter echoing in the small apartment. For the first time in 3 years, Sienna Clark didn't have to worry about tomorrow. Because tomorrow was going to be beautiful. The first day at the Lily's Legacy office felt like stepping onto another planet. The office wasn't a sleek corporate high-rise. It was a converted warehouse, filled with the low hum of activity, the smell of coffee, and the feeling of tangible purpose. Men and women in leather and denim worked alongside people in polo shirts and slacks. A large, beautifully painted mural of a smiling, gap-toothed girl, Lily, dominated one wall. Sienna stood awkwardly in the entrance, clutching her new purse, feeling like an imposter. A gleaming brass nameplate on her desk read, "Sienna Clark, Community Outreach Coordinator." Didn't feel real. Cole found her there, a warm smile on his face. "Lost." "A little," she admitted. "I've never had a desk before. Or a nameplate." "Get used to it," he said, guiding her to her new workstation. "You earned it." Her first week was a whirlwind of learning. She learned the intricate systems they used to vet applications, the network of social services they partnered with, and the profound, heartbreaking stories of the people they helped. She read applications from single mothers choosing between rent and chemotherapy, veterans sleeping in their cars, families whose homes had been destroyed by fires. Each story was a fresh pain, a reminder of how close she herself had been to the edge. But now, instead of helpless empathy, she felt a surge of empowerment. She wasn't just feeling their pain. She was in a position to alleviate it. The most surreal moment came at the end of her first week. She walked into a pharmacy, not to ask for a partial refill or to see if they had a cheaper generic, but to pick up a 3-month supply of Maya's asthma inhalers. When the pharmacist told her the total, a number that would have once sent her into a panic, she simply handed over the new insurance card. "There's no copay on this plan," the pharmacist said, handing the bag over. "You're all set." Sienna walked out into the sunshine, the bag feeling impossibly light in her hand. She sat in her newly repaired car, looked at the full inhalers on the passenger seat, and cried. It wasn't the $25,000 check, or the new furniture that defined her new life. It was this, the simple, profound freedom from fear. The ability to give her child the one thing she needed to breathe without having to sacrifice something else. Her life wasn't just stable now. It was secure. and that security gave her the strength to do her new job with a fierce, unwavering compassion. She wasn't just a coordinator. She was a witness. She knew their struggles because she had lived them. When she spoke to a desperate mother on the phone, she could say with absolute sincerity, "I understand. Let's figure this out together." But as her new life began, the old world fought back. Someone from her neighborhood had filmed the biker's arrival and posted it online. The video went viral. The initial comments were brutal. "She's glorifying gang culture. Disgusting. Hell's Angels are violent criminals. This is just a PR stunt. Staged. No way this is real. She's probably one of them." Sienna read them, each one a small sharp sting. They didn't know the truth. They saw the jackets, the tattoos, just as Hawk had said they would. Linda called her, her voice full of righteous anger. "You ignore those fools, honey. They don't know your heart. They don't know the truth." Sienna tried, but the words hurt. Then, something incredible began to happen. A new wave of comments started to appear, not on Sienna's video, but in response to it. People started sharing their own stories. A man from Ohio posted a video from his small, clean apartment. "My name is John. I'm a veteran. 3 years ago I was homeless. Lily's legacy found me, got me housing, and helped me find a job. That gang saved my life." A woman from Pennsylvania shared a picture of a smiling little girl. "This is my daughter, Sarah. Lily's legacy paid for the experimental surgery that saved her from a rare heart defect. They are angels no matter what they wear." Post after post, testimonial after testimonial. The narrative began to shift. The hashtag Lily's legacy started trending. The tide of public opinion, so quick to judge, was slowly, powerfully turning. People weren't just seeing a biker gang anymore. They were seeing a family. The vacant lot at the corner of Sienna Street was no longer vacant. It was a bustling construction site. The sign out front, bold and proud, read, "Future Home of Clark House. A Lily's Legacy Community Center." At the groundbreaking ceremony, Sienna stood with a silver shovel in her hand, flanked by Hawk and the mayor. Her neighbors, the same ones who had once viewed her with suspicion, stood in the crowd cheering. Local news cameras filmed the event. "Miss Clark," a reporter asked, microphone extended, "how does it feel to have a community center named after you?" Sienna looked out at the crowd, at the faces of her neighbors, at the proud, smiling faces of the bikers, and at Maya, who was sitting on Linda's lap in the front row. "It's not about me," she said, her voice clear and steady. "It's about what happens when people choose kindness over fear. This building is a monument to that choice." Her role at Lily's Legacy had evolved. She was no longer just reviewing applications from a desk. Hawk had been right. Her greatest strength was her empathy. Her superpower, as he called it, was her ability to see the person behind the paperwork. One afternoon, she was assigned the case of Marcus Johnson, a 32-year-old veteran living in his car. The notes on his file were sparse. Honorable discharge, PTSD diagnosis, lost his job, spiraled from there. Sienna didn't call him. She found out where he usually parked his car and went to him. She didn't approach with a clipboard and a list of questions. She brought 2 cups of coffee and a bag of donuts. She tapped on his window. He looked up, his eyes wary and haunted. She just smiled. "I'm Sienna. I brought breakfast. Can we talk?" They sat on a park bench, not in a stuffy office. He didn't want to talk about his problems, so she told him about hers. She told him about the laundromat, about counting pennies for her daughter's breakfast, about the feeling of complete and utter hopelessness. She showed him her own scars. For the first time in months, Marcus talked. He told her about his service, about the friends he'd lost, about the nightmares that wouldn't let him sleep. He told her about the shame of losing his job, his apartment, his sense of self. "I just need a reason to keep going," he whispered, his voice cracking. Okay, Sienna said. Let's find one. Within a week, Lily's legacy had placed him in a transitional housing program specifically for veterans. They enrolled him in job training and connected him with a therapist who specialized in PTSD. Sienna checked in on him every few days, not as a caseworker but as a friend. 3 months later, Marcus was working at a local factory. He had his own small apartment. He was attending therapy twice a week. He wasn't magically cured, but he had hope. He came to the office to see Sienna, his handshake firm, his eyes clear. You gave me a second chance, he said, his voice thick with emotion. Sienna shook her head. No, Marcus. You gave yourself a second chance. I just opened the door. As he left, Hawk was standing in the doorway of his office, watching. He nodded at Sienna, a look of profound pride on his face. See, he said simply. That's why you're here. Clark House opened on a sunny Saturday in late spring. The ribbon-cutting ceremony drew hundreds of people. Sienna and Maya cut the big red ribbon together, both of them laughing as cameras flashed. The building was beautiful, filled with light and purpose. It housed a job training center with new computers, a food bank with fully stocked shelves, an after-school program with books and art supplies, and a small medical clinic offering free health checkups. On its first day, 43 people walked through the doors seeking help. All 43 left with something they needed: a bag of groceries, a resume building workshop, an appointment with a doctor, a safe place for their child to go after school. The center became the new heart of the neighborhood. Mrs. Johnson was a regular volunteer at the food bank, her former judgment replaced by a fierce, maternal pride for what Sienna had built. Mr. Rodriguez, who had once yelled at Sienna in the street, now taught a free weekly class on basic car maintenance. The community, once fractured by fear, was healing itself, becoming stronger and more connected than ever before. Sienna now led a team of 5 outreach coordinators. Each one was a person Lily's legacy had helped first, now paying the kindness forward. Marcus, the veteran she'd met in the park, was her newest hire. His empathy, born from his own struggle, made him a natural. The organization itself was expanding, with 2 new centers modeled after Clark House opening in neighboring towns. Hawk, fully recovered, was the tireless, passionate heart of it all, but Sienna had become its soul. One afternoon, Hawk found her sitting at her desk, staring at a picture of Lily on the wall. You know what she'd say if she could see all this? He asked quietly. Sienna looked at him. What? She'd say, Daddy, you did good. He paused, his eyes glistening. And then she'd look at you and say, Thank you for helping my daddy do good. Later that week, a documentary film crew came to interview Sienna. They wanted to tell her story. She sat in front of the camera, the bright lights making her nervous, but she spoke from the heart. A year ago, she said, her voice steady, I had $8 and a choice. I could help a stranger or I could feed my daughter breakfast. I chose to help, and that single choice ended up saving both of us. It taught me that you never know how one small act of kindness will ripple out into the world. The short film premiered online. Within a week it had 5 million views. One day, Sienna drove back to the gas station where it all began. The same board attendant was behind the counter. He didn't recognize her at first. She asked to speak to the manager and got permission to place a small, simple brass plaque on the outside wall, near where Hawk had collapsed. The plaque read, On this spot, a small act of kindness changed everything. Lily's legacy. As she was leaving, the attendant walked over, a look of dawning recognition on his face. Hey, I remember you, he said quietly. You're the lady with the biker. Sienna nodded. I told you not to help him, he said, his gaze dropping to the floor. I've been following your story, what you've built. I was wrong. I'm sorry. Sienna offered him a small, genuine smile. We all learn. That's what matters. She walked out of that gas station for the second time, but this time everything was different. This time she wasn't broke, exhausted and alone. She had a family, a community, and a purpose, all born from $8 and a choice. The first anniversary celebration for Clark House was a joyous, chaotic affair. The building overflowed with people. The families who had been helped, the bikers who had volunteered, the neighbors who had learned to see past their prejudices. A banner stretched across the main wall read, "1 year of kindness." Sienna stood at a small podium, looking out at the sea of faces. Maya sat in the front row, beaming with pride. "A year ago," Sienna began, her voice echoing slightly in the crowded room, "I spent my last $8 on a stranger in a parking lot. I didn't know his name. I didn't know who he was. All I knew was that he needed help. That's it." The room applauded warmly. "I was scared," she continued. "People told me I was making a mistake, that I was bringing trouble into my life. And for a little while I believed them." She found Hawk in the back of the room, leaning against a wall, his arms crossed, a proud smile on his face. "But what I've learned is this. Kindness is never a mistake. Compassion is never the wrong choice. Even when it costs you everything, especially then." After the speech, as people mingled, a young woman with nervous eyes approached her. "Hi," she said. "My name is Emily. I don't know if you remember me, but you helped my mom, Mrs. Lawson, about 6 months ago. She had cancer, couldn't afford her treatments." Sienna searched her memory, which was now filled with hundreds of faces and stories. "Mrs. Lawson, yes, of course. How is she?" Emily's eyes filled with tears which spilled down her cheeks. "She's in remission. The doctors said it's a miracle. But it wasn't a miracle. It was you. It was Lily's legacy." They hugged tightly, two strangers bound by a chain of kindness. That evening, after the celebration ended, Sienna walked home. She still walked sometimes, even though her car was perfectly reliable. She liked the quiet, the time to think. As she passed a different gas station, she saw a young man sitting on the curb, his head in his hands. He looked to be in his early 20s, his face etched with despair. The old Sienna might have walked past, too tired and overwhelmed by her own problems to take on someone else's. But she wasn't the old Sienna. She stopped. "Hey, are you okay?" The young man looked up, his eyes red-rimmed. "My car broke down. The tow is $100 and I don't have it. I'm supposed to pick up my son from daycare in 20 minutes. I don't know what to do." Without a second thought, Sienna opened her purse and pulled out her wallet. She took out a $100 bill and held it out to him. "What?" "No, I can't take that," he stammered, shaking his head. "Yes, you can," Sienna said gently. "Get your car towed. Go get your son." The young man stared at the money as if it were a mirage. "I don't even know you. You don't have to." Sienna pulled out a Lily's Legacy business card and handed it to him. "When you're back on your feet, just help someone else. Pass it on. And if you ever need more help than this, you call that number." Tears streamed down his face as he took the money and the card. "Thank you," he whispered. "I won't forget this." Sienna smiled, a deep, knowing smile. "I know you won't." She walked away, her heart full. A year ago, she had been the one with nothing, the one who needed saving. Now she was the one providing the lifeline. The circle was complete. Kindness, she knew now, was not a resource that depleted. It was a current that, once started, only grew stronger as it flowed from one person to the next. Her story had started with $8 and a choice. It had led to a new life, a new family, and a new community. But the most important thing it had created was a legacy of its own. A ripple of compassion spreading outward, touching countless lives, proving that the most powerful force for change in the world is one person's decision to help another, no questions asked. And somewhere Sienna knew Lily was watching and she was smiling.